Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Member Status Committee of Lichfield District Council, being held in the committee room in the council offices on Wednesday, 30th November 2022. We are also sending this meeting out live on our channel on YouTube. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence, which we have received from Councillors Ho, who is in Hong Kong, Michael Wilcox, who is on LGA business in the Wirral, Robertson and Grange, who have both got very heavy colds. We don't want to wish to infect the rest of us. Yes, Councillor Norman.
I was in Manchester overnight, so some of us globetrotters as well,
Thank you for that. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Is there anything to declare on the items on the agenda? No. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting and any matters arising. Anybody would like to propose that the meetings are a fair and view? Thank you, Councillor White. Seconder for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Norman. Excellent. So there's the signed copy. Item 4, the meeting. Assistant Director of Finance and Commissioning and Section 151 Officer Anthony Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. We normally bring a mid-year Treasury Management report to the committee around this time. I've indulged myself this time and added a little bit on about a local audit update because there's been quite a significant announcement since last committee. So the reason, I'll go over this every time, the reason we prepare this report, so the Constitution assigns responsibility for Treasury Management to this committee. Treasury Management is about capital expenditure, funding, borrowing, investments and prudential indicators. There are 3 cyclical Treasury Management reports. So we do a strategy around February, which is what we plan to do. The mid-year one, which is the one we're looking at now, which is looking at how are we doing against the strategy, are there any issues? And an annual Treasury Management report around June time, what did we actually do? So there's a few points I just want to highlight. So we've taken a light touch approach to capital expenditure projections at 6 months, mainly because of the amount of organisational change that's going on. We do know there are a number of projects, including the replacement leisure centre, where projections will need to be revisited. Therefore, at the 8-month stage, we'll undertake a more robust review around the bigger projects and the ones we know there are delays, and will inform the preparation of the revised budget that will go to council in February. Capital receipts are slightly higher than budgeted. Normally, this happens when Bromford provide projections for right to buy receipts during the year. Whether this will continue with the level of interest rate increases and the cost of mortgage increase, we'll have to wait and see. In terms of balance sheet projections, so the main material difference on the balance sheet projection to what we budgeted is the lower pension obligation, the matching unusable reserve that we had provided by the actuary for the 31st of March 2022. However, investments have increased as well, again due to an increase in working capital at the 31st of March. It's been partially offset by reduction in reserves. So strategic investments which are in the report were valued at the 30th of September 2022. That was just 1 week after the mini budget, when market volatility reached its height and a reduction in value has been provided. Since that date, the markets have become increasingly more stable. Equity, bond, currency indexes have all started to recover. Strategic fund investments are made in the knowledge that capital values can fluctuate, but with the confidence that over a 3 to 5 year period, total returns will exceed cash interest rates. When we went into the strategic investments, to manage the risk of value volatility, we set up an earmark reserve, and we put into that any income we received in excess of a benchmark level of 2.5%. And we've topped it up recently with additional investment income resulting from the additional interest rate increases. One other thing, just to highlight to the committee is that at the moment we manage those value volatilities through the balance sheet because there's a statutory override in place. That's due to run out the 31st of March 2023. We responded to the consultation along with a lot of local government requesting that that's either extended or it's made a permanent override. However, if it's not extended, what it would mean is you would manage the value changes via reserves. That's what we always do. We've set up the reserve. We would be able to manage that through the reserve we've got in place. Just on the prudential indicators then, again, all compliant on those, there's no issues. So just on the local audit update, so at the beginning of October 23, PSA announced the results of the latest procurement, which we opted in to be part of, covering the 5-year period 23, 24 to 27, 28. That procurement secured sufficient audit capacity to appoint auditors to all local bodies. 99% of eligible bodies join the procurement, so there are a few that I'm assuming must be procuring individual auditors. The firm that's been identified for the council as one of the new entrants, and confirmation of that firm is subject to the outcome of the consultation exercise. That consultation exercise is more around any significant reasons why they can't be appointed, so things like conflict of interest, etc. One thing I will make a point of, and we've done it in the Ovian scrutiny papers, the fees are likely to increase significantly. 150% has been flagged as part of the procurement. For us, that's about an increase of about £86,000 a year, which we've included in the MTFS as a budget pressure. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anthony, very much indeed. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report. We're asked to raise issues that are flagged in the report, and just a couple for me, really. You seem to use the word projection and forecast interchangeably, which causes me some concern. A projection is a desired outcome. Forecast is a likely outcome. And in relation to the leisure centre, you use the word projection, I think. So does that indicate from where you sit as 151 officer that you only think it's a desired outcome and not a likely outcome? For politicians like me, those sort of words are quite important.
It's more to do with the fact that in the year we projected, or let's say we estimated, so the budget said that there was 2.5 million of spend, I think, within the £5 million approved budget. And we're not going to spend anywhere near that level this year. It's quite clear. We've spent very little. We are pending what we do with the leisure centre in terms of its design, facilities, whether the LUF bid is successful, and then what the council wants to do in terms of additional funding or not. So whilst all that is going on, there isn't much spend taking place. So that's why I'm saying the projected spend for the year is likely to be very low.
So presumably it goes from projection to forecast when perhaps a development management agreement is signed or something akin to that.
So it would, I'd be probably have more confidence than if I forecast it, because there were actions taking place that gave me that confidence.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a few more questions?
Please do.
Could you give me reassurance, and it's unlikely that it's going to be the case, but I want to hear it from you, that you have no exposure to the crypto markets, particularly FTX and its related subordinate exchanges?
No, we've got no exposure to that. I've never, to be honest, I've said this before, I'd never put the council in a position to go into investments I didn't understand myself, and I don't even understand the markets and the risks behind them.
Neither do I, so that's reassuring. The statutory override, I would declare at this point that Staffordshire County Council is in the same position on the statutory overrides, and I'm delighted to hear that you've responded to the government asking for it to be extended indefinitely. You can't have a situation where a statutory override allows councils to do one thing and then say with the other hand that we're going to take it, we're going to remove it from you. You say it's going to be managed by reserves, but I don't remember reserves having baked into them the idea that the statutory override might be withdrawn from us. So this will be a new pressure on the reserves, presumably.
No, because irrespective of the statutory override, we'd set up an earmark reserve to manage value volatility. So the statutory override was giving us extra comfort, but we'd already set the reserve up on the basis that that override may not be extended beyond the 31st of March 2023. So from my prudent point of view, I thought at the time that we were entering into these investments, we should set money aside way in advance of the override potentially disappearing to then manage any risk if it didn't get extended.
Well done, you. And then finally, my final point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I do think we need to pay the auditors, much as it pains me to say so, but we do need to pay the auditors an appropriate amount of money to get a proper job done, because it has got, from my perspective elsewhere, it's got to the point that it's a bit ridiculous. And so this reflection of the work they do, Mr. Chairman, I think is an entirely appropriate thing for us to be accounting for. We're looking for an outstanding audit, by the way.
I've got 3 or 4 comments more than questions, if I may, Anthony. One is on 110. Delighted that you're confirming the council is compliant in all its limits, and presumably with the blessing of our on 3.36. The book loss. We've debated this on and off in full council, I think, a time or two, with interest rates for the last few years being ridiculous, 0.1% on savings account. And there's been a lot of pressure to put it into other investments. And I've been the one who's been saying be very, very, very careful with external investments, because they can just as easily go down as go up. And here we are showing that it's okay, it's a book loss at the moment, but it's 1.2 million, which is a lot of money. And so I put that as a comment to the meeting. And on page 19, we've got on the financial, prudential, all of those are again green ticks, which is good to see, and gives us confidence that we've got the governments doing well on that. So thank you very much indeed for your report. If there is nothing else, we have. Yes, sorry, Councillor Sylvester Hall.
Thank you very much. Apologies for my absence, and I hope I'm not duplicating anything with a couple of queries. I noticed that we had a higher increase in the revenues from the right to buy, and I wondered if there was any implications further down the line for any costs that we may have to endure with regards to stock available. So if I could ask the question on that one, and then if I've got another couple which are not associated with that.
So it's a good question. I think that one of the pressures that I think has been highlighted nationally in terms of the deficit of social housing is the fact that right to buy has led to a large number of sales to the private sector, and that hasn't been replaced like for like. So whilst we gain from the right to buy, and if it's a higher level it's beneficial, and it removes housing from the social sector. I suppose the good thing from the council's perspective is that it's approved that money will be reinvested back into housing and homelessness strategy. So we can do what we feel fit with the money we've got available to potentially address some of those issues. However, it's probably not going to be on a like-for-like number basis.
Thank you for that one. The next one I think has already been picked up a little bit, but I just think it might be worthwhile having some attention in its own capacity. So we mentioned about the love bid, and we know that we're going back in for it again. Is there some danger that the prudent and careful financial management that we have within the council is actually going to disadvantage us potentially with that love bid? I know my opinion on that is that that wouldn't be fair. that there's certainly a deserving capacity to that, and representations are being made elsewhere as well. But I just think that there's an opportunity there for some discussion on that. Thank you.
So I don't believe that's the case. Obviously, the priority area you're allocated into is a big significant driver in where that money is allocated. There's 3 areas and we're in the lowest area, so that implies we're one of the lower priorities. Having been involved in the bid, it is a very detailed, very intensive amount of information you need to provide. It has certainly increased in the second round from the first round. I, hand on heart, on the bits we did, I can't believe we could have done much more in terms of a robust bid that gave the council a good chance. And the feedback informally is that it's a credible bid. The irony of this could be, though, that money is allocated to areas that are priority 1 and 2 that haven't got quite as good bids, but they gain because of the priority, but they may not be as financially stable councils, and therefore they're not able to deliver it, even though they are a priority area. So I'd like to think that we're given an even chance of getting money from the bid, even though we're in a priority 3 area.
Okay, the recommendations for this paper are to review the report, issues raised within, and secondly, to review the prudential indicators contained within the report. Are we content we have done that? Thank you very much. Move on to item 5, which is the internal audit report. Andrew Wood, Senior Auditor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present my quarterly update to committee outlining the progress against the audit plan and the work completed during the financial year. As outlined in my report as at 30th September 2022, we had completed 25% of the audit plan against a profile completion of 50%. As requested by this committee, I've included within my quarterly progress report a profile of audits throughout 2022-23. However, we'll need to keep this under review to ensure that we meet the 90% completion rate for the audit plan. Appendix 1 of my report outlines the current position for each audit, including the work already undertaken and completed. I should state here that BDO are currently scoping, allocating resources and agreeing with management the typing of audits to ensure their audits for 2022-23 are completed by the 31st of March 2023. Both myself and management are keeping the audit plan position under review to ensure achieving 90% completion of the audit plan. Due to the length of time between the closure of Q2 for 2022-23 and this committee date, I can confirm that since the 1st of October 2022, we have 2 reports at draft report stage, which will be finalised shortly, 3 audits in progress, and have scoped and briefed a further 7 audits, and field work will progress in due course. At the conclusion of Q3 and in preparation for the development of the audit plan for 2023-24, a review of resourcing will be undertaken. This will also fit into the upcoming external quality assessment for compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. As both contracts for BDO and eTech Business Services, who provide our IT auditor role, they will conclude on the 31st of March 2023. We'll consider the current issues around the recruitment to the senior auditor post. As outlined previously to the committee, the recruitment market continues to be tight and has not eased since the end of the pandemic. Consideration will be given to the possibility of extending the BDO contract and eTech Business Services for another year. This will provide BDO specifically the ability to start on the 2023-24 audit plan earlier in the year and to increase the percentage completion rate for the audit plan again earlier in the year. Appendix 1 also provides information as at the 30th September 2022 of the outstanding high priority recommendations, and also provides an analysis of the number of audit recommendations outstanding by the financial year raised. We are working with both leadership team and management to keep under review all outstanding audit recommendations. And again, one of the improvements that we've implemented since my last quarterly report is that these are now presented monthly to leadership team as part of my reporting on strategic risks. I would like to highlight to the committee of the 5 high priority recommendations. I've included both the current management responses and also the actions to resolve these with timescales and responsible officers. Since this report was drawn up, I can, however, confirm that the 2 recommendations in relation to Beacon Park were reviewed as part of our agreed follow-up processes and confirmed as being fully implemented. The Beacon Park follow-up review has been drafted and once finalised will be issued to committee members. This therefore leaves us with 3 high priority recommendations outstanding at the currently. I would also like to highlight that CITFA have recently published an update to their guidance in respect of audit committees, and I've included these as appendices 2 to 5 inclusive. As per our reporting arrangements, it is proposed to undertake an audit committee effectiveness review using the newly issued CITFA guidance and questionnaires. This work will be completed in February 2023, so that the results will be reported to this committee in April 2023. The CITFA guidance also highlights best practice in relation to the consideration of an independent member or co-opted members onto the committee. This is recommended to widen the skills available to the committee and also close any potential knowledge gaps. Once we've completed the committee effectiveness review, we will be in a better position to consider this further. Additionally, I will draw together a training plan for the committee, which will be developed for the new municipal year in 2023-24. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's hard talking to you now, but having to face that way, so bear with me as well. With regards to the high priorities, I've noticed some were in progress, and you've just mentioned that those have been done now. With regards to the others, is there generally a helpful level of engagement with those that are the high priority in particular?
Yes, there is a engagement with those high priority recommendations. When I first came in as audit manager, one of my remits was to follow up the outstanding audit recommendations and hold those meetings with the relevant members of leadership team, etc. going forward. And I think that's improved the situation in relation to those high priority recommendations, but also other recommendations that we've raised, both the medium and also the low priority.
Yes, carry on.
Yeah, and so on that basis and the timeframes that are there, you're confident that those are going to be met?
Yes, I am confident that those are going to be met, and those have been discussed with management to ensure that those are completed on time with the relevant arrangements in place.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remain, as I have been previously when these reports come forward, concerned about the resourcing of internal audit, and you touched on that in your preamble. I don't know what your sleep pattern is like the night before these committee meetings, but I should imagine you sort of think to yourself, oh, I'm going to have to come to this committee again with all the difficult questions they ask, because we are quite a difficult bunch, really, sharp and inquiring minds, looking into the runnings of the council. But that's not your fault, the resourcing thing at all. And to you, Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering whether or not there's come a time when perhaps you as chairman of the committee might consider writing to the chief executive in a sort of formal sense. This committee takes the internal audit very, very seriously indeed. I don't know if you've already done this, forgive me if you have. And that we would expect to see that department adequately resourced. It isn't really for Mr. Wood to be coming to this committee telling us all the difficulties he's got. Of course, he has to explain why why you're a little behind. But actually, we do need to have this function within the council appropriately staffed, so that we can make sure that on behalf of the taxpayers of this district, that we're seeing to it that the money is well spent and that there's an internal audit function taking place. So that's a point. The next is another point, I'm afraid. The questionnaire going out in March, interesting timing. we will have the final meeting of this committee in April. And then the electorate will decide who controls this authority for the new municipal year. Whoever takes control of this authority after May have a view of and a set of priorities. And so I think that you may want to consider the timing of that questionnaire. I think that trying to motivate members of this committee who might not be standing for election to fill in the questionnaire might be time wasted. Furthermore, the decision around whether or not you would have external support joining this committee will depend on what the makeup of this committee is looking like. It may have a completely different look and feel after the elections in May. So they're my two observations, really. I don't want to start picking holes in Mr. Wood's report for the simple reason that the resourcing issue is something that has been dragging on for some time now, Mr. Chairman, and I just wonder whether or not you could intervene on our behalf.
I think if I can come back on the first point, Councillor White, it did come up, if you remember, at the last meeting when we had the Chief Executive Officer here, as well as Christie. The problem is nationwide. It isn't just this council, and there's been a lot of time spent on trying to get your senior auditor appointed for 12 months now, Andrew, something like that. It is a national problem. With every council, they are struggling, and there has to be here. I'll happily do the letter just to reiterate it, as it were. And with regards to your second point, I totally agree with you. Potentially, everything could change very rapidly in early May, and I think doing the exercise of the quality of the people on the audit committee, half the people on the current committee could lose their seats in May, for example. So I think to leave it till after that would be a sensible move, because the way it's currently constructed, in my opinion, is a very, very effective committee. And we need to readdress it completely in the new municipal year. Yes, Councillor Norman.
Thanks, Jim. If you do the letter saying, "Dear Simon, Alan asked me to," in that guidance, which I'm particularly interested in, it was about the role of scrutiny, the role of scrutiny in audit. So, there needs to be scrutiny of the case that is being made for extra resources, I think. I don't have a problem with the training. I thought that the in questionnaire, because there could be some issues there that are good enough for the new council. That is the timing issue that Alan has referred to. This be useful for when those people are picked from wherever they're from. What they can, this is what's expected of you. This is the training you definitely need, and then progress from there. So there is some work, I think, before the elections that would be helpful. I mean, okay, from our experience, and we might be looking with some particularly good members on here that are able to ask the right sort of questions, but I think there is some benefit of that, in my view. The other one was about scrutiny in audit, because I wanted the report on the complaints that every council has to go to scrutiny, and Mike Wilcox, unfortunately, is elsewhere. So, no, audit, we're dealing with that. Now, it's a big report here, but it isn't on here. So there is a reference in the guidance there about other committees not doing that, but I think I'll ask for scrutiny to look at that. I don't think it was supposed to come near the complaints report, but if it gets missed by both, I'll ask for that to scrutiny. But there may be some things you could ask scrutiny to do. A task group, if you've got because anybody can be a member of the task group. So a task group not being done here, but ask scrutiny to say, can a task group look at this particular aspect that you think they're competent of doing? They could be members of this committee anyway. That would be helpful as well in scrutinising for audit. So that was about the training. The other thing I noticed on there was about the committee size of audit chair, which was 8 is what they suggest. Well, we have to have 9. Now, I was going to suggest that Councillor White might want to go, but he's asked so many good questions. Maybe somebody who's absent today might want to be chucked off, or you're going to wait for the next election. And I think 9 seems to be okay. People are going to be hard. Don't know why it's particularly 8. It doesn't say about 8. It says 8. But obviously, actually, an odd number is always better, I think, in when you have to make decisions. But and I just mentioned that. But anybody wants to volunteer, that's up to from their side. Obviously, not mine.
Again, all very useful points, Councillor. I'll take them on board. I personally like the idea of 9. It's a much better number than 8. But it does depend on the skills of the people involved, doesn't it? You know, yeah, we'll do that. To take a point, I don't know whether you wanted to come back, Councillor White, on terms of, is it worthwhile doing the skill thing twice? Once before and once after the election. I'm much more inclined to go with your suggestion that I've just got a feeling that the new council is going to be radically different to the current one.
I just think you might struggle to motivate councillors to fill the form in, and because they're going to be out knocking on doors at the time as well, those who are standing for election again. I think Councillor Norman makes a good point about complaints. That really does have to be put into a public arena. This is the Member Standards Committee. I suspect this is probably the appropriate place for it, but you cannot, under any circumstances, not you, but the authority cannot hide from the complaints that come in. In other places, it goes to the Senior Scrutiny Committee. There's only one scrutiny committee here. I suspect, given the workload that they have and given the title of this committee, it's probably better coming here. We are duty bound to, in my opinion, to, as Councillor Norman says, to get it on the table and reflect on the complaints that we've received, and also demonstrate to the electorate, the public, that we are a listening authority. Sometimes we won't necessarily pick up on all the complaints and say, yeah, you've got a point. Sometimes we'll say, no, I think you're wrong, but actually it's got to be done.
Thank you. Could I ask Governor Manager Mark to comment on that? It seems sensible to me. You all know I'm not restanding in the election next year, so it'll be a new chairman here. But I do think this is the committee to deal and consider all complaints about the council.
Yeah, in terms of the 2 areas, because there's the ethical of the member complaints, which we circulate as briefing papers at present. It can be called into the committee if it so wishes, but we do an annual, monitoring office will do an annual report on any complaints that are received in terms of code of conduct, covering both the district council and the parishes. Was you talking more about the wide other types of complaints?
Councillor White.
So the whole the whole complaint shebang has to come somewhere, because if there's a spike in complaints from, say, another parish council, or if there's a spike in complaints about particular elements of the services that we provide, we're better to get it out on the table so that we can start to say, well, what's going internal audit, what's going on? Why would there be so many complaints? The logic of Councillor Norman's proposal is I think difficult to stand against, to be honest.
I tend to agree. Are we saying that we would like to have it formally on our work programme for this committee at least once a year? Councillor Norman.
Yeah.
I would say so. I mean, I do remember, because we did have on the Education Scrutiny Committee different names, but basically Education Scrutiny Committee had all the education issues, and I may have got it in the more senior committee now. I can't remember now, but it is important it's there, so at least you can have a view or a judgment. I'm not saying there's anything I'm concerned about in the briefing papers we've had, but until you do have it before scrutiny, and then you start looking at things, you may make those same mistakes again, and people be dissatisfied again. So, not just part of our proper process as a council as a whole.
So, are you happy with that, Mark?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. Happy to take that away, and we'll formalise the approach to how we bring complaints to this committee. Yeah.
Excellent. Good move, I think. Yeah. Yes, Andrew.
If I could just come in relation to a response on the audit committee effectiveness questionnaires, I think Councillor White is perfectly correct in the assumption on that. What I would suggest, though, is that there are 2 questionnaires in relation to that's parts of CIFRA audit guidance. One of them is the actual questionnaires which the committee members complete. And there is also a separate review of the effectiveness, which is a general questionnaire, which I usually complete on an annual basis and then present basically for a report for the whole year of how effective the committee has been in its role and remit. So what I would suggest is that rather than supplying the committee member questionnaires, we would leave that until the new municipal year to actually get the insight from that side of things, and then the separate questionnaire that I complete that I would normally bring to the February, well, it would be the April meeting, but that would be a retrospective look over the last year of basically the committee's compliance with the Sit for Guidance during the year. So I would suggest that I would continue on with that report, but the actual audit committee member questionnaire I would leave until the new municipal year.
That sounds very positive, and I agree with that. Do you agree with that, Councillor White?
For you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
well, I'm very happy with it. I think that's a good way to proceed. Thank you. Are there any more questions, comments on this item? The recommendation is pretty simple, that we note progress report, which I think we have done. Thank you for all the efforts on that. Item number 6 is the update on the risk management. Again, our internal audit manager, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to bring to the committee my quarterly update in respect of the council's approach to risk management and the actions taken to manage the council's most significant risks. I've continued to liaise with leadership team on a monthly basis to review the council's strategic risk register. And again, this was last reviewed on the 2nd and 23rd of November 2022. And the risk register has been updated, taking into account management's comments and observations. Since my last quarterly report to this committee, I'd like to highlight the following. We currently only have one risk, strategic risk 1, which is above the council's risk appetite, and this is focused around the pressures on the availability of finance, which means that the council may not be able to deliver its key priorities. As committee will be aware, there are continuing pressures in respect of inflation, increased energy costs, and the impact of the autumn statement from the 17th of November 2022. As with all strategic risks, we keep this under review on a monthly basis to identify any issues arising and whether any further mitigating controls are required. Strategic risk 2 around the resilience of teams to effectively respond to further disruptions to services has been reviewed and updated to remove COVID-specific risks. Strategic risk 2 now includes the controls identified when previous strategic risk 8 of being a better council. And I'll move on to strategic risk 8 later in my report. Strategic risk 3, the capacity and capability to deliver, adapt to emerging landscape, is again being reviewed by leadership team in respect of the development of senior management and also levers and recruitment to the authority. As identified in strategic risk 2, we have again incorporated areas of strategic risk 8 around being a better council into this risk. Strategic risk 4 around the failure to meet governance and/or statutory obligations. We've progressed during the quarter and the new procurement and governance teams are fully embedded within the council. Committee will be aware of the issues around GDPR and a report on this is to be provided to the committee. We have however transitioned to providing for an internally recruited data protection officer. Strategic risk 5 and the failure to respond to wider socio-economic environment. Whilst the council has little control over this, it is reflected that this can affect the growth and prosperity of the local area. This is being reviewed in conjunction with strategic risk 1, and the current score for this risk increased to reflect the current effects of both inflation and energy costs. Strategic risk 6, from discussion at leadership team on 2nd of November, it was agreed to remove this risk from the register. This was removed due to the council-driven exercises in respect of the council office refurbishment and also the implementation of agile working. Moving on to strategic risk 7, which is the threat to the council's ICT systems of a cyber attack. The council continues to review and take into account risks and potential for cyber attacks affecting the council's infrastructure. ICT continues to maintain no view of the current situation and implements advice received nationally and locally. The current score has recently been reduced from 12 to 8. However, during the last 3 months, it has been increased and reduced according to the threats faced from state players. To date, there have been no recorded incidents at Lichfield District Council around specific cyber attacks. However, the council remains vigilant to maintain systems of control, raise staff awareness, implement best practice, and respond proactively when required. Strategic risk 8 was around being a better council, and this has been removed from the risk register and incorporated into strategic risk 2 and 3. As outlined in paragraph 3.5 of my report, this shows the movement of strategic risks between June 2022 and November 2022. Between those 2 dates, there has been an overall reduction in the risk score profile of the council, and leadership team continue to work on these areas to ensure that risks are readily reviewed and mitigated controls are in place to achieve the objectives of the council. The strategic risk register is attached as Appendix 1 and highlights changes in yellow. In addition, this includes risks which are potentially on the horizon and may be included within the strategic risk register, dependent upon, again, the current risk environment faced by the council. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you for a very full report, Andrew. Yes, Councillor Norman.
Excuse me. It's only one really regarding the ICT and that, because we're having major changes to IT and getting in and overhauling that. I just wondered if that was in the immediate future a greater risk when there's a big changeover as opposed to when it's in place. I just wondered if that was a time to have particular safeguards in place or particular observance of particular issues. I just don't know about that occurs to me, that's all.
Yeah, whenever there's any new systems development going forward, there's always potential risks in relation to those developments. But again, those are the ones that are managed effectively by management as part of the change control process and within the project management process within the implementation of new systems. Again, those are areas that do, when there are changes to systems generally and also ICT systems, they do raise the risk profile in relation to that, because obviously you need to be aware of the impacts that those changes have on other systems within the council, for example, and also again making sure that you are in that position where you have proactively dotted the I's and crossed the T's to ensure that all those risks are covered and managed. But again, it does potentially raise the risk profile, yes.
Just saying, so that being the case, then there's extra processes to put in place and vigilance, if you like, on that. That's all within there, and we're aware of that. Well, yeah.
Yes, that's correct, and it's the development also of the mitigating controls that you put in place as well as part of that as the part of the project management process that you've got in there. Yes,
Probably said that we weren't clear. Thank you, Stephanie.
Councillor Sylvester Hall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On that same note, I was surprised to see that actually it had come down, knowing that there is a significant amount of development that's taking place with regards to automation of services as well coming through. So that surprised me. And as well, learning about a local utility company that had a significant cyber attack as well, that I did think, again, it surprised me that it had been reduced. So that's my first one on strategic risk 7. And if I could also ask about strategic risk 3, we've already had a conversation about staffing internally at the moment. And unless there's something happening that I'm not aware of, and maybe it's a communication process, that I'm really surprised to see the staffing one being reduced. So I think that maybe there's some explanation or just to elaborate on that particular one, because I'm not seeing that from where I'm sat. Thank you.
I think in relation to the first point around strategic risk 7, that does, like I tried to iterate within the report, that moves almost on a monthly basis. So again, it's taking into account what's happening outside of the council's environment, but also what is also happening within the council's environment. And I think one of the areas that, for example, yes, there are examples of cyber attacks happening in the local area. We haven't had anything from a Lichfield District Council point of view directly in relation to that. There's always a continually developing sort of process and regime in relation to any potential cyber attacks that sort of develop over time. And I think part of the issue is to remain vigilant in relation to that, taking into account any national guidance that comes through from the National Cybersecurity Centre, but also locally, and also the professionalism of the ICT service as well in relation to that. I think there's, like I say, there are well-developed controls in place to effectively stop those cyber attacks at the front door before they get through the front door and behind any sort of firewall or etc. in relation to that. So I think when you're looking at those cyber attacks, there are cyber attacks and hacking attacks occurring continually throughout. And that would go for your own personal PC or laptop as it would a council environment. So I think from that side of things, we are well protected in relation to that. But again, we can't let our guard down, because we can't be in that position where an attack does come through and is successful. So we've got to maintain that we are at the cutting edge in relation to that.
Okay, so if I can just clarify then, so rather than a reducing amount of threat, it's actually our ability to be more robust in the defence.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Just
Yeah, so one of the discussion points that we've really focused on and had emphasis, obviously, in the tail end of focusing through all of the outcomes from audit recommendations and making sure the control measures are all fully implemented, tested and developed, and raising staff awareness and the levels of training has been quite critical in that, to make sure that everybody has the appropriate multi-factor authentication and things like that going on within their systems and how they're using that software. So that's fully embedded now. Obviously, we review it on a monthly basis, so it does depend on what we find when we come to do that review each month.
in relation to strategic risk 3, which was the capacity and capability to deliver, again, that's a discussion that we've had at leadership team in relation to that, and sort of from leadership team discussions, again, that's sort of come back again around development and the implementation of senior management team of putting that into place, and also managing around the recruitment and active recruitment for the authority as well going forward. So again, that's one of the reasons why the score has come down. I think the other side of it as well is from being a better council and also having a look at the data-driven approach as well, and that's the other reason why that score has slightly reduced over the quarter.
You, Gary?
Yeah, thank you. If I could just follow up on that, I think that maybe then some of the detail might be helpful to look at what the turnover rate is and how that's comparing to other local authorities. Just to give a little bit more quantifiable information, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, just in terms of that, we have seen the peak, obviously through the target operating model implementation throughout the summer. There were a number of roles that were identified and have changed significantly as a result of that. We're now on the upward swing, if you like, in terms of the roles are now clarified, the recruitment's underway. We've got some key positions that are already identified and being filled, currently and imminently in the next month or so. So we've seen the worst of it, and we're coming back through that process now. There will be a significant amount of churn this year. We knew that at the outset of the instigation of being a better council. We believe we're through the worst of it, and we're starting to stabilise now and see the benefits of the new ways of working and the new target operating model in action.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I always appreciate how difficult these things are to do. Who would have thought, or who could have anticipated there'd be an attempt to blow up the bond market in 24th of September? But you could never have anticipated that, could you? But there are some things we can anticipate. So in the horizon scanning risks that you identified in October 2022, you don't mention at all the end of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which will take place, I think, at the end of March. Yeah. That means that those people who are currently lodged with as guests of householders in Lichfield will find themselves with their funding stopped. That could potentially swamp our housing stock, and we don't quite know what's going to happen there at all, unless you know anything I don't, Christy.
No, but we have been actively discussing it in the last 2 risk assessments, I think, that we've undertaken.
I've not seen it in here. Is it in here?
Yeah.
Or I missed it.
It's included within strategic risk within strategic risk 5, and again including Ukraine families and refugee dispersal within the area, and that's highlighted as a risk in there. It was originally on the horizon scanning section, and it was actually lifted up into strategic risk 5.
Okay, it's going up fast.
Yes.
And the other reason why it's going up fast is because Christmas is coming, and we're seeing across Staffordshire families who are anticipating using their spare room for their relatives, which is currently occupied by a Ukrainian family. And all the other part about it is the Ukrainian tradition is to celebrate Christmas around the 7th of January, I think it is, something like that. And so there's going to be a grinding of traditions at that point as well. So I think that it is something that is coming up the agenda very, very fast. The other one is the you've got on the scanning the elections review by the Association of Electoral Administrators. I think that the guidance has been issued, and I think the guidance says that everybody's got to re-register for a postal vote, which is a huge undertaking. Furthermore, the electorate is going to have to turn up to the polling place in May with photo ID, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So that the administration of elections between now and May is a really big risk, and what we can't afford to do is disenfranchise people living in Lichfield district as we come up to the election. So I think that is more than a horizon scanning risk now. That needs to be elevated quite urgently.
Thank you, Councillor White. Would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, just to inform the committee, I've been asked by Overview and Scrutiny to provide a briefing note, so we've been working on that this week and hoping to get out imminently. Yes, we are aware of some of the guidance that's been issued in relation to that. Not all of it is available. Certainly the voter registration portal we know now will go live on the 18th of January to be able to issue the guidance, to be able to issue the forms out to the electorate who don't have suitable forms of identity. But we're actively planning all the project documentation around that now, and reprofiling all of our election planning around the new circumstances we find ourselves in through the introduction of that work. But yeah, happy to extend that briefing note to audit member standards as well as Overview and Scrutiny members.
That would be very helpful.
I mean, all briefing notes, Chair, should go to everyone. That's the question I was going to ask, not just to scrutiny. All members should have these briefing notes. I was going to ask that question, because I fear that wasn't the case. So, anyway.
Councillor White.
Within the briefing note, I'm looking for reassurance that those people who've been postal voters understand their circumstances, because since the last time we did the postal voting push, Lichfield Mercury no longer exists. If you want to go to Lichfield Live, you can, but that's a very limited source of information for people. The council tax leaflets will go out, I think, late March, something like that. That will get to everybody, but that's leaving it very late. And I'm particularly concerned about older people being disenfranchised who've been used to postal voting and are happy with postal voting and might not even know it's there. And younger people not knowing about the ID requirement.
Yes, Councillor North.
Just back to the IT issues. I'll just ask through you, Chair, Chrissy Timmins, regarding when you go into the as an elected member, when I go onto the email, should I be getting a request for a code on the authenticator on your phone? Is that do you know that one?
Your multi-factor authenticator. I can't profess to understand how it all works.
No, I just wonder if you get it. No, I was just wondering if the request Should
Yeah.
come every time you log on.
Not every time you log on,
Oh.
every time you use a different device.
Oh,
So it's
okay,
not, it's
sorry,
not
that's
every
okay,
log on.
okay.
It's every time that you're accessing the device, I think for the first time that the MFA
Okay.
kicks in.
Yeah, well, so
Yeah.
just
People are nodding, the technical people are nodding at
Yeah,
me.
no,
so-
that's okay. I just was you're right. This is a very silly question. Well, it can be a very silly question if the answer is very simple, which is that now we have various organisations and companies within the building, which is great. I just wonder if that was a possible threat to our system. There's no connection at all with them. That's great, but you know, there may be some connection. So I just wondered if that has at least been factored in as something to consider. They may be a very silly question. It's like nothing to do with us. It's entirely separate from our system. But I just don't know with Wi-Fi and all that.
I don't find that's it. That's a very good question, which
Oh
I
yeah,
thought of.
Right.
Christy, Andrew, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just so the committee are aware, yeah, when the first tenants were coming in, we were very actively planning with the property team, just in terms of how we were going to segregate the space, because information security starts with your building security and works up from there. So I can assure the members that all of the spaces that are shared are known to be shared, and no information is left within those shared spaces. And all of the areas where we expect our information to be secure are clearly secured. And you will notice now that we have a new door at the end of our corridor that we use, and that is coded and entered only for LDC staff to access, and the communications infrastructure and the technology infrastructure that we're using, whilst it originates from the same IT team, it's an entirely separate and secure form from what the tenants are accessing and using to what we use as internal people within LDC.
Does that fully answer your question?
If I get a nod from maybe that would be helpful. As an extra, yeah. Thank you.
Takes a look at one of the bosses and goes, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, Alan.
Okay, as always, this item on the agenda is always very heavily looked at by us, and I think that's absolutely right. Are there any more worries, thoughts, questions on this item? Because again, the recommendation is fairly straightforward, that we note this risk management update and receive assurances on actions taking place to manage all the council's most significant risks. There's been quite a few extra items brought up, but I think that's excellent. It's the whole idea of this item. Everybody happy that we've done this duty? Thank you all very much indeed. I won't read it all out, but number 7 is counter fraud updates, whistleblowing, etc., etc. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I would like to bring my annual counter fraud update report to the committee. My report outlines the work we've undertaken during the year, which has included involvement in the Cabinet Office's National Fraud Initiative, and also involvement in grant assurance work around test and trace support payments, energy rebates, rough sleeper initiative, and protect and vaccinate. During 2022-23, we will continue to, we will continue to be taking part in the National Fraud Initiative and provide input into grant assurance work. I can confirm that management have fully achieved the data upload requirements for the National Fraud Initiative for the exercise, which was required to be completed by the 18th of November. And again, all queries and questions raised following this data upload have been fully addressed, and we await the data matches to be supplied so that we can carry out those reviews. As committee will be aware, there has been one irregularity identified, which was investigated and reported to the committee earlier in the year. We are currently undertaking a follow-up review in this area of Beacon Park, and will report accordingly to provide assurance that recommendations have been implemented and actioned by management. I can confirm that of the original 13 recommendations, 3 of recommendations are currently outstanding, 2 of medium priority which are partly implemented, and 1 which is low priority which is outstanding. All the high priority recommendations have been implemented. We have reassessed the assurance given and can confirm that from limited assurance we can give, taking into account the management progress on recommendation implementation, a substantial assurance level. It should be noted and previously reported in my quarterly progress report, as I said, that both high priority recommendations have been implemented by management. I would also like to bring to the committee's attention that CITFA are currently consulting on implementing an international standard in respect of anti-corruption. Having initially reviewed the consultation document, I can report that our policies currently comply with the outlined draft standard. However, as consultation is ongoing, I will update the committee with any subsequent changes as they occur. It should be noted that CITFA are currently using best practice from within the UK local government sector, so the expected changes will be minimal. As agreed at this committee's meeting on the 12th of November 2020, the review cycle for all fraud policies was updated from annually to every 4 years around the election cycle. However, it was agreed that policies would be refreshed and updated by myself or the principal auditor annually to take account of minor amendments such as changes in job roles. I can report that this exercise has been completed for the current year, and these are attached for your information in appendices 1 to 4 to my report. Any changes have been highlighted in yellow within the documents. As previously reported, I can confirm that the next full refresh will also include the results of the CITFA consultation, and the policies will be brought to this committee for a review and approval. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions? Yes, Councillor North.
No question is, I'm very grateful for highlighting those differences, trust me.
That is something we asked for, I think, 2 years ago, and it's very, very helpful to know.
My wife still claims credit, you know. I think you gave her the credit, actually. So, you know, just saying.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor White.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do hope you appreciate I'm asking loads of questions because Dave Robertson's not here. But, somebody has to step up. So just on the whistleblowing, the numbers of whistleblowing cases, just because no whistleblowing cases exist doesn't mean to say that people have got necessarily happy with the circumstances they find themselves in. The whistleblowing policy is there. How well socialized is it amongst the staff? And have you sort of just gone out as perhaps a senior member and, I look at, say, Christie, for example, gone to a member of staff in operational services and said, what would you do if you weren't happy about something? And they might go, I have no idea. Actually, I'm not very happy at all. We just don't know. So the thing about whistleblowing is it's fine to have the policy in place, but if it's sitting on a shelf and only comes to this committee and we've got unhappy members of staff, they tend to vote with their feet. And so what happens is a committee like this starts to draw conclusions about staff turnover compared to the number of whistleblowing policies. Now, there has been quite a high level of staff turnover. And so I just want to be sure that the whistleblowing policy is well socialized. So that's my first point. The second point, Mr. Chairman, is around freedom of information requests. In another place, every week I get a sheet of freedom of information requests. Well, I won't say sheet reams of freedom of information requests across my desk.
You do it every 6 months.
You do it more frequently than that, Steve.
No,
But I presume that this place does get freedom of information requests. I'd like to know, what I don't know whether or not where they go. They are important to members of the public who are inquiring about the running of this authority. Some of them are vexatious, undoubtedly. Some of them require from reporters some are looking for an ability to tender for IT contracts. I can give you a whole list of different ones, but there are some there that actually point in the direction of a potential problem with the authority that might not be emerging through the whistleblowing. But if you do whistleblowing and FOI, you can get a good sense of what the outside perception of the organisation actually is. And I think this committee might be the place where we would want to know about that sort of stuff. So I'm interested to know.
Thank you. Christy, sounds like a question for you.
Do you want me to? Well, actually, I was going to introduce you to our compliance and data protection officer, Laura Brentnell, who has been employed in that position entirely to do, as you suggest, to have that higher level view of what's going on and where indicators or causes for concern may be. So obviously we've recognised that there are issues with data protection, which we'll come on to later in the agenda, but also in developing that higher level view of the information flows through the organisation and how we can use those to improve the service environment and governance structures. So Laura has been with the council for many years, and one of her first projects was to take freedom of information as it was 4 or 5 years ago, and to start proactively managing that service. And incidentally, as part of being a better council, one of our indicators is to continue to reduce the number of freedom of information requests that we receive as a council by ensuring that our information assets and data is more readily available for people, so they don't have to ask us for it. It's there and available, particularly for those things that we find that come in as a routine basis, which we now publish on a regular basis, thanks to the work that Laura's done. So through the development of the role, Laura will be taking that perhaps to the next level and providing more information and intelligence back to this committee to do as you suggest. So I'll let her add to that if you feel you can, Laura.
Yes, so one of the reports you received as a briefing paper this year was the complaints, FOIs, MPs and compliments. And that pulls together a full narrative of what people are saying through the MP, through complaints, through FOIs. So we take on board all of them as we go and we feed that back through. One of the fundamental issues I have had here doing complaints and FOIs for a while is lessons learned aren't necessarily always done, which you would have seen in the report, the briefing paper. So that's getting fed back to the leadership team on a more regular basis now. We are working with services to look at what they're getting on a frequent basis, why we're getting that, and if there's anything really core as an issue that we address that at that time. The governance team will do full reviews of all the FOIs and stuff that come through, and if we can answer it in any way at that point, we will, and if we need to flag anything at that point, we do with leadership team. So in terms of whistleblowing, which is back to your original point, that is picked up as part of that process, and we do feed back that narrative through to leadership team in those ways.
May I continue on that to Councillor Whitehouse? So which committee of this council looks at the summaries of all of these various items of whistleblowing in the FOI? Because I'm not aware of them.
They come through as briefing notes,
Yeah,
isn't it? And
which is what's going to come through as a report. That's what we'll bring through as a report going forward rather than a briefing paper, so you can have that time to get underneath those.
Thank you.
that's an excellent outcome.
Thank you. Are there, yes, Councillor Sylvester Hall.
Thank you very much. One of the things that you mentioned earlier on was about how you can correlate information that we have within this council and national systems. Is that the tell us once? So I noticed that as we move more into a cashless society now, that potential for, such as the one incident that we mentioned or that's been highlighted, a lot of the opportunity now lies within electronic accounts, the use of purchase cards, P cards, credit cards within the authority as well. A little bit more detail on that, but also how we look at where we know that we have residents who are deceased now, that is also caught, and that there's no opportunity there for there to be a continuation of and the tell us once system. Thanks.
In relation to the National Fraud Initiative, then we're looking at right across the board on, for example, creditor payments, payroll payments within the council, for example, a couple. We're also looking at taxi licensing, those areas and data from that side. And also sort of areas within sort of single person discount, council tax benefits, etc., and those areas. So again, those are matched on a national basis, so they're picking up for nationally in relation to that. I'm not aware that is linked into the tell us once system effectively, although I probably believe that council tax, etc., and housing benefit would be linked in relation to the tell us once process. But again, from our perspective, it's getting those matches. So you get those matches where, for example, there's the potential for people with multiple jobs, for example, with the same NI number, and it throws it out as a match, and there may be specific reasons why that is, but we can then do the proactive checks on looking at those. And again, it's looking at those benefit payments, etc., as well, and matching the benefit payments to make sure that you haven't got a claimant, for example, within Lichfield District Council area or Tamworth Borough Council area, for example, claiming benefits that they're not entitled to. So again, those are the sort of the data-driven aspects that we're looking at as part of the National Fraud Initiative.
The recommendation here is again fairly simple: endorse the contents of the the counter fraud update report. Have we all that? Thank you. Finally, the work programme. Oh, sorry, the GDPR, do beg your pardon. Sorry, Lauren, your debut. Lauren.
Hi there. I am the new internal data protection officer.
We know.
So I'm bringing forward to you today the protection policy, which has been updated. There are just some small amendments. I've had a review that leadership team have and audit have, and an update on the audit work programme that's gone through. So I've been in post just about 8 weeks, and it's been a very busy 8 weeks. I normally start any job that I do with a full audit of everything in front of me, so thanks for doing that ahead of time. That's incredibly helpful. And an apology to you as a committee, because we have now the second time in the assurance audit around GDPR, and we need to do better than that. Audit for me is something that we should be doing as a bare minimum. It shouldn't be a nice to have. So we need to get ourselves into a better position than that. So we have made some strides towards progressing all the issues that have been raised. One of them is a high risk being the policy that's in front of you today for approval, and that will be published tomorrow, subject to the approval tonight. So we've achieved a lot of the work programme, particularly a lot of the sort of smaller quick wins. There were the sort of reasonable assurances towards the end that were just sort of minor amendments. So those have all been achieved. A lot of the medium risks have been achieved as well, at least in part. Some of the bigger items, like the record of processing activities, that will be an ongoing project. There has been a high staff turnover, so getting updates on who's actually now in post and making sure those key posts are recruited to is still in process, but all the adjustments to the ROPA that were requested have been made. The retention schedule and record of processing activities will be going to all tier 4 managers, who will be the overall owners of all of that data, and I'll be having meetings with them going forward, so they'll have a chance to input into the record of process activities at that time, as well as a retention schedule. That document, the ROPA, will then become a breathing document rather than a log as we have it now, and that will be shared into a shared space in our LDC Teams area. So that will be updated live as things change. So we are making progress. We haven't made as much progress as I wanted to at this point in time, but we are making progress, and I welcome Audit to come back and have a chat with us, or do a full review again later, sort of into March next year, as we make progress through the work stream. And I'm sure you all have lots of questions, so happy to field them.
No pressure then.
To observe, Mr. Chairman, that the person who's been driving this from the committee, Councillor Green, I'm sure she's watching, because she wouldn't miss one of these committees even though she's sick, isn't here tonight, so I feel slightly exposed and would be looking to her for guidance on the questions. You see that swerve?
I did indeed. I am surprised. I thought there would be a lot more questions on that.
Well, it'd be awkward that. Difficult to ask.
Go on, Councillor Dawn.
Well, no, I'm just pointing out, being a good fellow sort of thing. Difficult to ask awkward questions if someone's only been here for a few weeks, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
the way she told it to us was brilliant. When it comes to March, though, we might have, yeah. No need to respond to that.
No, that's fine. I will be bringing you regular updates, obviously, because I want you to be assured that we are taking this incredibly seriously. We did have a DPIA through this week, my first one. And actually what was really nice on there was that somebody had put, they're taking compliance very seriously. We need to get this right. So we've left a very clear message through. And I've delivered some very key message this week to everybody, which is that I've actually updated the disciplinary policy. And if anybody refuses to or doesn't do with GDPR, it will be grievance straight away. So there's been a very clear message, and it will be very, very different.
We have gone easy on you, Laura, because you've been here 6 weeks doing this job, and Andrew's been had been in post for 6 days, and we gave him a right old mallet again.
Bearing in mind your relative news to the lot, is it worthwhile bringing this back for an update on the February meeting?
Absolutely, yeah, it will be here.
That'd be good. Okay. Again, the recommendations there in front of you to approve the updated data protection policy to meet the UK regulations in Appendix A, and note the action plan in Appendix B for the future. Are we all happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well done. Now we're on to the work programme. I don't think there's much to say other than you've hopefully noted to put in your diaries the a special meeting on the 18th of January, which was replacing the one on the 23rd of November, for us to go through the statement of accounts with Grant Thornton. Are there any comments on the work programme? Yes,
Councillor White.
Mr. Chairman, I don't quite know where to take this because I only sit on the one committee on the authority. But I do want to flag it up and ask whether or not you have a chairs coordinating group of some sort where you can actually decide where you would take a look at this. I'm concerned about licensing of taxis. I'm not concerned about the work of the licensing committee, but what I am concerned about is that Wolverhampton City Council issues around 15,000 licenses per year to private hire drivers. I'm worried that those licenses, you cannot have a decent level of oversight on that number of licenses going out per year. And people who could be bad actors might be able to get licenses and operate in this district. And I think on behalf of our residents, it's our duty, if we're aware of this, and I am aware of it, to flag it up and ask that somewhere somebody takes a look at this and gives me as a councillor reassurance that some young lady's not getting it. I pick on a young lady just for the illustration, but some young lady's not getting into the back of a taxi that's licensed, for which there was almost no review of the license before it was issued by an authority that's not here. It is clearly a money-making thing for Wolverhampton City Council. They took in £3.7 million in their licensing effort to get those 15,000 licenses. It's quite lucrative. But if I was, my duty of care as a councillor doesn't allow me to go past that. I think I need it on the table. It's either in our work programme or it's in the scrutiny committee's work programme, or perhaps your colleague, the chairman of the licensing committee, might want to take a look at it. But at some point, somebody's going to have to take a look at this before there's a tragedy, because we've not had decent oversight or audit of the licensing that's going on across this district.
Kirsty, would you like to, Christy, sorry, would you like to comment on that, please?
Yes, certainly. At the moment, I as chief operating officer, I picked up licensing as something that sat outside of the Tom while we're recruiting a new regulator and enforcement manager. But we are doing some work around engagement with the local taxi drivers who those that we license have raised similar concerns about people who aren't licensed by us, and the level at which we go to ensure the safety of our residents and users of those taxi services versus what they're seeing from those people who aren't licensed by the Cannock and Lichfield district. So yes, I'm happy to take that away and look at what we can do to provide you that assurance and what options we have in terms of either increasing the enforcement for those areas or undertaking that work to raise awareness about the risks of using non-LDC licensed taxis.
Can I also suggest as part of that you have a conversation with the local divisional commander of the police. Some of these taxis has been alleged are being used for ferrying Class A narcotics and other county lines activities involving minors. So I do think there's a very serious issue here that we really do need to get in amongst.
Yeah, there is a task group that's working on that regionally, so I'm happy to provide that update as well.
Regional task group. What is a regional task group?
Well, all the authorities are meeting and talking about the concerns that are being raised that you're expressing in terms of use of taxis for county lines. So we're feeding into that process and discussing it with other counterparts of the districts. So I'm happy to provide that information through and see what else we can do to give you that assurance.
I don't know which committee it should go to, Mr. Chairman, but I would like you to speak to the chair.
Can you give us a timeline on that?
Yeah, I can look at my work program and try and get an update to you in the next couple of weeks regarding how we can stage it through and liaise with Mark and the committee chairs to ensure that it's picked up by one committee rather than in the next cycle of work programs.
Okay. Thank you. Again, yes, Councillor North.
Well, this is a scrutiny issue, I would have thought, in addition to the police officer. You've got to be careful how you go about when you're complaining in a sense, complaining about another local authority or suggesting another local authority is not doing it right, because you're not going to get much help from that local authority. So the way it's approached, senior level officers, the chief executives, first of all, to actually outline these issues and to see whether there is any scrutiny report that another authority, or whether scrutiny could actually work with another scrutiny committee, as was tried to foist it on us with Tamworth, but in this case, different local authorities entirely. I think there's a way of going about it. It can't be ignored if there's concerns been raised. But I think going about it, you've got to get that right politically, smartly politically as well. So that's all I can suggest, really. Just writing it all down.
There's 62 licenses a day, Steve.
No, I'm saying I accept that. I mean, let's look at other places as well. I mean, it doesn't make sense that. Well, audit can audit talk to an audit in another authority. I mean, be interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, can do. We have got a statutory chief auditors group, so I can bring that. I can raise that as part of the meeting with that, and that's in a week and a bit's time. So can have a look at that.
Okay. Yeah, you happy with that, Councillor? Is it worthwhile, because it is bringing more on the spot, Christie, to have it again as an item on the February meeting for an update?
Yeah, more than happy to have it on the agenda if that's what you want. Yeah.
Yes, please. Excellent.
Has anybody else got any other questions, worries, thoughts on our committee? Because that is the last item on the agenda. In which case, I formally say the meeting is ending at 7:23 p.m. And thank you very much, Lee, for your attendance and your hard work as always. Thank you.
I bet you wish you'd stay locked down there.